Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And today, we're going to be informative because I went and watched a second video by Sean. I'll link it down below for you guys. And normally I use this segment to trash people, but more and more I'm trying to find people out there in the community who are legit sources of information also. So this doesn't need to be always a negative segment. Although we can have a lot of fun making fun of some of these ass clowns. But let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. So I decided to look a little further into Sean because I did a video on him a few weeks ago. Was it 2 or 3 weeks ago? He actually came in and commented, and I actually gave a very positive review of a video he did. Now, I went and watched this other video of his. I think he's put it out in the last day. It's the last video he did. And I'm kind of listening, and I'm going, okay, this guy gets it. This guy genuinely gets it. This is someone who actually really and truly does understand drug-free training, how to put on muscle, how to get big, how to get jacked without blasting a bunch of gear. He gets it. And so after hearing a couple of sources of information, I can't say that, hey, I know that this guy, everything he's going to say is right, but I have a pretty good idea that, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. He's one of the good guys in the industry. I'm willing to go ahead and give Sean a nod at this point and say, brother, I think you know your shit. I think people would do well to listen to what you have to say. You're a smart guy, and you clearly have a lot of experience in the iron game. And I listened to the video, and I really like some points that he highlighted, because you guys know I'm against body part splits, but he made several comments in there that I think were really like nuanced answers. But I think he got it right. I think he really got it right. So I'm going to give props to him for that. Because when he broke it down, he said, look, there's a lot of people out there who've gone to the other extreme who are saying you can't gain muscle at all. You can't get big on bro splits. And that's not true. That's obviously not true. If you're training with progressive overload on any muscle, and you're getting sufficient training volume to stimulate adaptation, that muscle is going to grow no matter how shitty or terrible your training is. That's reality. And if it's not, then you're either not eating enough, not sleeping enough, or you just are not training hard enough. However, it can be done, and this is where I've made similar statements to this in the past, and so it's like, I'm like, all right, we are on the same page. Of course, a muscle can grow training it once a week. If you're training with enough volume and enough workload and progressive overload is there, of course you can. It's going to be slower, though. It is going to be suboptimal. But when in the world has being suboptimal ever prevented results in something? No, it just means you're not going to do your best. And he kind of said, and I partially agree with this statement, of saying for most people, if we put it, okay, let's go to the word most. If we go to the word most, I will agree with this. But he said optimal is most likely going to be somewhere between 1.5 and 3 times a week for a body part for any given individual, depending on where they are in their training, what their training volume looks like, everything else. Okay, I think that's fair. I actually agree with that. I usually push people in the direction of 3. But I will say 2 times a week, as long as volume, as long as weekly volume is sufficient, you can probably maximize muscle growth on that. All right, it is possible to maximize muscle growth on twice a week if sufficient training volume is there. Right, and some 1.5, I think it's getting a little low, but for some advanced lifters, maybe I can see that who are doing certain things. I think that's going to be rare. Now, I also like ultra-high frequency training, but for me, that's more of a neuromuscular efficiency thing. It's more the greasing the groove concept and just additional workload and volume through the week. Because you guys know, you guys see me squat up to 6 days a week. You guys have seen me press up to 6 days a week. Like even right now, I do chin-ups. I do pull-ups 6 days a week. But the whole point there is that I think he's pretty accurate with that statement because, and that's a nuanced answer, because yeah, it really does depend. There are different factors in play as far as how advanced you are, all of that. But it has to do with total muscle protein synthesis uptime. It has to do with growth cycles, and you're only going to stimulate so much growth. I mean, people have this idea that there's this linear growth increase, and this is why the body part split thing doesn't work. you only can stimulate so much growth in a given training session, and even if you continue to reach your maximum, say maximum recoverable volume, you might only stimulate 1% or 2% more muscle growth than had you done half the volume. Right? It's still more, but the problem you run into is that you're done growing within something like 28 to 48 hours after training on any given muscle group. And so therefore you guys see the problem. If you're only stimulating a few percent, let's say you even stimulate 10% more muscle growth, but you're doing it at half the frequency, you guys see the problem. You end up gaining less muscle. And I do agree with him that it's also not linear in terms of frequency either. In other words, if you train a muscle 3 times a week, you are not going to gain muscle at 3 times the rate that you would once a week. However, it might be 50% faster. And when you're talking about reaching your total drug-free potential, you're talking about years of difference in how long it takes you to get there. In other words, training a muscle once a week, you might build yourself up to a certain amount of size and strength over 5 years that you could have done in 3 with a higher frequency. I mean, you'll still reach the end game. You'll still reach the goal, but it's going to be at a different rate. It could take you a couple of years longer to get there. And so it depends on what you're willing to accept with that. Now, he made a few different points regarding certain instances where there might be a benefit to training once a week, and the one of them I really caught, because some of it I was a little wishy-washy on. Okay, maybe, I don't know about the time constraints. If you got time constraints, go in and do some heavy squats, some pull-ups, some pressing, and get the hell out of the gym. I mean, problem solved if you've only got 30 minutes. I don't think a body part split is the best way to deal with that. But he hit one that was interesting for advanced lifters, and it has to do with weak point training. Now, I don't care if you're talking about physique goals or performance goals. This same thing could apply to a power lifter. And I like that he broke it down of saying, okay, when you're a very advanced lifter, let's just call it lifter, because irrespective of what your goal are, you trying to gain muscle, you trying to improve your bench press, what are you trying to do? We develop weak points. We have areas that we know we need to focus more on. Those areas need more frequency and volume. So for me, normally when people say, oh, I'm doing a body part split to specialize, well, if you're specializing just means doing 25 sets once a week on a muscle group, that's not specializing. You're going to gain like shit on that. It's going to be slower. You're going to gain, but you're not helping yourself. Weak points need to be trained at a higher frequency, particularly when you are drug-free, especially when you're drug-free. So at a certain threshold, a more advanced lifter, we have a limited recovery ability. We do. And believe me, I understand, guys. I'm turning 42 in a few weeks, like 3 weeks. I'm an advanced lifter myself. I'm not blasting gear. And I understand all about recovery resources. All about recovery resources. So it gets limited. And if you need to specialize, let's say, for example, you know that your squat is a weak point right now, or your legs, either way, and you can't spare the extra recovery resources by training your squat 3 days a week. Or I mean, your bench and your deadlift 3 days a week. Or in the case of the other guys training their back and chest and arms and everything else, it beats you up. And so you need to specialize in your legs or your squat, depending upon how you're looking at it. You might need to cut everything else back to once a week. Why? Because you're not going to make many gains in those anyways, and those can afford to sit still and stagnate for a bit, so that you can put your energy and your recovery resources into your weak points, so that maybe you only train your other lifts and your other muscles once a week, and then you come in and you squat 4 days a week, right? So that you can specialize. And that's legitimate specialization. That's a perfect example of specialization. And so when he described that as a legitimate excuse for a once a week training, because you need to slow everything else down so you can put your focus in where you need to specialize in a weak point, I think he hit the nail right on the head. I think that was beautifully said. I think it was well worded, and I think that was one of the best examples I've ever seen of where a once a week split does actually make sense, particularly for the advanced lifter. So that was a nuanced point, but I think for a lot of my audience, right, my people here, a lot of you guys are advanced lifters. I think that's a good piece of advice. So yeah, I'm going to give this video the nod, and at this point I'm going to say Sean is probably an all-around pretty good source of information. I think he knows what the hell he's talking about. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.